iparams can be obtained in two different ways, and it depends whether if the iparam is secure or if the iparam is a normal iparam. So in the case of secure iparam, we use the templating technique, and which is the second one here. And if it's a normal iparam, we can get it using the client API itself, which is client.iparams.get. So the syntax, have a very close look at it. This is the syntax, for any normal iparam which is not secure, which is not marked as a secure iparam. You can just get it using the client API, using the client.iparams.get. You can maybe pause the iparam name or maybe not, and it will get the iparam name. And in the case of secure iparam, you just have to use the templating technique. This works only with request API and manifest.json. So we will look at it, and that is a disclaimer here, but this is how it works. So this is the templating. This is very similar to the handlebar templates or any other templating engine like Liquid or something like that. And this is very familiar. This is the syntax. You have the angular brackets and the percentage with the equals on the opening side, and followed by iparam dot, it's a dot notation, and you specify the name of the iparam which you try to access. And this is just for secure iparams, or any iparams that you want to use with request API or the manifest.json domain whitelisting paths. So it's applicable only for that, and mainly for primarily for secure iparam retrieval. Let's see how both of these cases work out, and let's go back to the IDE. So I'm just going to my app.js. So since this is just the your first app template, it just has the client on app activated lifecycle, which basically triggers every time the app is brought into scope. And we just get the contact data object, and we just show the name of the ticket creator. So it's pretty simple. So let's just go to the trial account and then see the outcome of the app. Since I have the trial account already created, and you might have also seen this in the previous tutorial, I just need to enable developer mode and then open my account. If not, it's very simple. You just have to open dev equal to true in a ticket, and remember this is a sidebar app, and so we have to look here, and always remember to turn on the load and save script. If you're doing it for the first time. And as you can see here, it's a very simple app. It shows a ticket creator, and it's very simple. So it's a very simple app. Let's do some magic here. So let's try to use the client.iparams.get. It's fairly simple. I just go back to the documentation. Oops, not this one. Let's go back to the retrieval part. I just copy the snippet, I just go back to the code, and then I paste this. Let's format the code, for better readability. And I'm just going to console log the data. So just before we see the output, I want to make sure that you have a close look at this iparams. Let's zoom out. We have 4 iparams: name, email, API, which is secure, and house. Alright, and we are going to print this from our front-end application within Freshdesk. So since FTK supports hot run, we don't have to reload the entire page. Let's just go back to the developer console, and into the console let's bring the app into scope, and here we and here we have the object, and let's take a closer look at it. We have the name, which is the standard text iparam. We have the email, which is the email iparam of email type, and we have the house, which is the drop-down iparam type, and we selected the Lannister value and hit install. And so we have these iparams, but of course you would have noticed something missing here. And yes, you are right. So we are missing the API iparam property here, and that field is not present here. And why? Yes, you are right, because it is a secure iparam. Remember what I said earlier, that secure iparams cannot be intercepted on the client side, or they cannot be inspected on the client side. So this is what it means. So any iparam which is marked as secure, it cannot be retrieved using the client object API. So which means if I were to use client.iparams.get, or if I were to use client.iparams.get and followed by that iparam name, I wouldn't be able to get that in the client side. And if it is the case, then how do we get it? So here's where things get interesting. So as we saw, how to get the normal iparams. With the case of secure iparams, they can be only obtained in coordination, in collaboration with two things. So one is with the request API. So if I go to the request API, and yeah, you see here that with the client API, with the client object, I can invoke the request API and the corresponding verb here. So I can only specify the iparam as a template with the request API, which means if I were to copy this, and if I were to, maybe I'll just substitute this instead of that, just format. And okay, in this case we don't have options, so it can be the JSON object. And remember the format. Yes, so we will just give any URL here, slash, maybe you just give it as a query parameter or something. And query parameter is, let's use the syntax that we learned. It's the angular brackets percent equals iparam dot notation followed by the iparam name, in which case it is API, and percentage close. Yeah, so this is the syntax that we follow to refer to the iparam, and I will tell you why we do this instead of using client.iparams.get. And this is how we use them or refer them in the application, and especially in the case of secure iparams. So this works only with request API and in manifest.json, and we'll see that soon, and how as well. So with google.com, I think we won't be able to intercept the backend. So to know what happens in the backend, I will just make use of request bin. It lets you create a mock API using which you can actually look the query parameters that appear. Let me just clear this. So you'll just be able to see the parameters which were the part of the API call, and let's see how it looks in the client side versus how it looks in the backend. Okay, let's copy this dummy endpoint. Let me paste it here instead of Google. Of course, Google won't let us intercept their log, so I just saved it, and let me make sure everything is fine. Just make sure the name is same as that of the iparam definition here. It's the same thing. Now let's go back to the application, and here we have it has succeeded. And if you look at it, it's probably the same thing as you remember here. Of course, it's the same thing. Yeah. So it's the same API key on the backend side. But hey, now you can question me that if you can look at the query parameter here, and of course this is a GET request, I can very well intercept this thing on the client side, right? And yeah, you're right. So let's look at the client side, and let's look at the logs. So we can look at the network logs. So any call that happens, it goes to the DP router, which is basically like a proxy, and you'll be able to see the parameters here, and here's the moment of surprise. If we look closely, and here we just have the template as is. The templating is as is, nothing is substituted at the moment. But if we look at the response, this response is from the mock API that we just created out of request bin. So what happens? Yes, you're right. So the platform takes care of the substitution of the iparams on its side so that nothing is exposed on the client side, and that's how we have secure iparams. And that is the point of secure iparams as well. You just mention it as secure, and once it is mentioned it as secure, the platform knows, since the platform already has these values stored during the installation time, it can just substitute that in place of the template on the platform side using the proxy, and that will handle the API call, and we don't have to worry about that. If you're wondering how it looks on the from the code how it looks from the resource perspective, you can actually place the debugger here, and you may be wondering if the substitution happens, and whether you may be able to inspect it from the source. And you may be right, your intuition may be right, and let's see if we can inspect this from the source. And let me just reload this page. If we try to bring the app into scope, basically by clicking on the title of the app, and yes, the debugger gets into action, it stops execution. You don't have to worry about this part. It's just things from the coverage metrics component that we have in the FTK. But let's look at the, and voila, here we have it is as is without being substituted. So you don't have to worry about credentials or security secure information being stolen from the source as well. And that is the beauty of secure iparams. As of now, we just covered important aspects of the iparams: storage, retrieval, and configuration. Now let's look at the real world usage of iparams, where it is shown inside the product. So generally, when apps are developed, they are uploaded to the marketplace, and ideally they are of two types, public or custom apps. And there is also a third category, but external apps, but they're not relevant to the current situation because they're not SDK apps. So public and custom apps being the SDK apps, and in our account we can access both of them. So I'm just looking at the public apps section, and I'm just going to look at the custom apps because that's what it will be by default if it's not public. And I just uploaded an app to the developer portal, and if I hit install, it's going to go through the app installation process, and it will show the iparams. So these are like any other iparams.json entries with its own set of metadata, and based on that it is rendered here. And once I fill that, and of course it has to be properly validated, and that is taken care of by iparams itself. And once it adheres to the validation, and once I hit install, it's going to install the app, and I'll be able to see the app over here. So that's the real world scenario where iparams will be used, and that's during the app installation process. So you can also go ahead and update the installation parameter values after the installation as well. Amazing, guys. So we just saw how to create iparams, how to configure them, and how to retrieve them. So the GitHub link is in the description. Please feel free to try this out and let me know if it worked for you. We'll also see how to create custom iparams and also other intricacies in the upcoming videos. So stay tuned, and thanks a lot. Goodbye.